So yesterday we discussed, the software testing lifecycle. So we introduced ourselves to that briefly, and we also talked a little bit about, how to write test cases. So we also saw the formal template and everything else. I got all your assignments. I saw that there are few areas that, some of you might have had trouble or, a little bit of a difficulty. So that's something we'll discuss in the practical part of today's session. And then, since in a class everybody is at a different level, so if you feel like you are yet to master test scenarios, then I would say stick to test scenarios in your assignment. But for those of you who feel like you're ready to take the next step would be writing test cases. So I would try and give you a brief introduction to test cases. And test cases is pretty much 50 to 60% of what we would do as QAs in real-time work environment. So getting a good hold of the test case topic is very important. So even though we are going to begin working on test cases today, it is definitely not the only time we are going to address that. For the next 3 to 4 days, we are going to talk a lot about test cases, understand them in depth, look at variations on how best to optimize the test case creation process and all that. But today I'm going to introduce you to the test cases concept, and for those of you, as I said, who feel like you're ready to go and take the next step, you might go to the test cases. And for those of you who feel like you want to take some time with test scenarios, you could spend some time with test scenarios also. Now, coming to the vocabulary part, yesterday we missed out on discussing the cost of quality, but that works to our advantage because the word that we are discussing today, ROI, which means return on investment, both of them are slightly related. But again, since the use value is less, I would like to defer these two to the end, but I hope today we are not going to miss out on them and we will discuss them. The main topic for today is a functional specification document walkthrough. And from time to time, what I would like to do is to actually, take one step back and get an aerial view about where we are at. So we know that we have gotten into the software testing lifecycle. And then we are working our way through it, but it's always important to understand when I say, for example, an activity like functional specifications document walkthrough, we kind of need to have an exact idea of where we are at in the SDLC and what are we expected to do, what precedes this step and what follows. So it's very important to kind of understand where we are at, the exact location of what we are trying to do, and so on and so forth. So I'll begin with that, then we'll move on to the test scenarios, and then the test cases, and finally we'll take a look at what ROI and cost of quality words mean. Emilio, I got your email and I'm yet to respond to that. All your questions are really great and I'll get back to them. I also received an email from Sohini asking me if this context of the class is, is it theoretical or is it, what kind of, syllabus are we covering in this class? I have replied her email already, but I thought this is something, it might be beneficial to discuss in the class as well. Now, this course is intended at the most practical way to get into your job and be able to perform your job effectively. So having said that, a little bit of theoretical foundation is necessary also. So there will be certain elements of theory. For example, the software development lifecycle, that is a theoretical concept. It might not have a lot of practical use value, but you see that is very important to understand for us to be able to, walk through the rest of the steps. So there is a good mix of theory and practice in this class to make sure that but then this class and the content or the course, it is targeted towards a job. However, the theory content, the theoretical extent of the theory that we are covering is not enough for certification in any case, because certification is totally about understanding different, quality levels and all that, which practically, as I said earlier, has no use value, or little use value. Again, trying not to be negative here. So it has a very little use value. That's why this is practical. This is most oriented at, catching you up, letting you, empowering you to be able to excel at your day-to-day job. And if you are looking for a job, this will get you prepped for it. So that's the kind of content that we are looking at here. Now let's get started with the FST walkthrough. Are we going to conduct some test, some kind of live test? That is Chandan's question. I mean, we do have requests from a few of our past participants saying that after the end of the session there should be a quiz or something. Here's my take on that subject. What I really think is we are all a professional group. So this is not like, a class where certain things are imposed on you. And most of us, most of the participants that we get have like, a full-time day job or something. And this is something that we are working on based on our personal aptitude and, aspiration, trying to make something out of ourselves in the professional IT world. So having said that, everybody works at a different pace. Everybody is self-driven. Everybody is responsible for themselves. So I find it a little petty to have like a series of multiple choice questions and trying to quiz you. So no, we don't have a test. But we do have something to the effect of a mock interview at the end. Again, that's optional. So if you want to opt that, if you want me to, prepare a set of questions and, take you through them, that's something I do. But for all the reasons I said before, I don't want this class to be a kind of, a forced. I don't want any section of this class to be forced. As much as we are learning, I want this also to be a brainstorming kind of sort of a situation, something that invokes thought, but not something that evaluates you or puts your stamp on whether or not you're ready, because that's something I feel is personal to everyone, and this journey, as much as we are learning, I would like this to be fun as well. I hope I answered that question. Okay, so before we get to the FST walkthrough, as I said earlier, we'll talk a little bit about where are we at in the STLC and all that. Now, STLC, sorry, software testing lifecycle, 3 stages: test planning, test design, and test execution. Now, test design, the input for test design is the FSD, which means that one of the first things that QA team will do is that we are going to read or review the FRD, try to understand the requirements. So this is the step that we are going to talk about today. But my question is, why are we starting with step 2? Why aren't we starting with test plan? The reason why we are not starting with test plan is at this point of time, without requirements, the kind of information that you would have in your test plan, I mean the test lead will, so the test lead or the QA lead would incorporate into the test plan would be schedules, team size. So pretty much, high level basic information. Survey scope also is not exactly clear at this point of time because you really don't know what is the extent of functionality of the software unless you go into the FSD review completely. So this is the high level information that is pretty much a subset of the information that you'll find in the project plan. So the test lead does not have a lot of activity here except to go through the project plan, pick out the sections that are relevant to a testing activity and incorporate into a test plan initial draft. So here you see there is not a lot of work for the QA team member. So that is why, so we'll talk about what a test strategy also, but at this point of time, there is not a lot of input that the QA team can provide, and in some circumstances the QA team might not even be formed at this point of time. There might just be the QA lead. So for all of these reasons, to start with test plan does not make a lot of sense for us because this is not something that we are involved in, and even if we are involved in, there's not a lot of decision making here involved for the QA team member. So that is why we are going to start a little bit, from the middle, which is the test design phase, which starts with the FSD review. So today what we'll do is we'll go through the FSD review, try and identify like this, how do we, what is the strategy that we follow when we are reviewing an FSD, if there are any best practices, what is expected of us, all of those things we'll figure it out. So the primary intention of a functional specification document review is to understand the software, define the scope, distribute the work, estimate better, all of these things, and we'll see how the FSD review process enables us to do all that. So let's talk a little bit about the process itself. Now, FSD document when you look at it, the authors for this document is the business analyst and the development team. So before we get any further, I want to take Padma's question because it's a very interesting one. Now, Padma's question is, if I don't read the FSD, how will I know the schedule? Now, this schedule is not like, a detailed schedule per se. But, when you're planning the overall project, like for example, if you're planning to develop a particular software, let's say it has like 100 features, this is the business requirements that you have, and the 100 features are planned. So the overall project manager will plan this project. So how can we plan if we don't know the extent of work? You're right, but then we agree on certain dates with the client, isn't it? We'll say that 6 months down the line, we will deliver this software to you. So based on the 6 months projection, based on the historical data of how the company performs in projects of this size, the project manager will make an educated, estimate of how much time the QA will take. So you're right, the schedules and the time size probably is not fixed or is not set in stone at this point of time, but this is an approximation. So when you agree that I will deliver the project by the end of the December, so you're anticipating QA to come sometime in November or before the deploy phase begins. So that kind of timeline that already has been established in the project plan is something that we pick up from the project plan in the initial stage. But as you said, this schedule is subject to change, the team size is subject to change because we don't know what is the extent of work we are working with. So that is why FST is very important to actually come up with a concrete test plan. And test plan, as you know, is a dynamic document. So even while reviewing the FRD or after you review the FRD, if you have better inputs to enhance the data that you've already incorporated into your test plan, you do have an option to do that. Make sense? Okay. All right, so this is a document, FST document is authored by the business analyst and the development teams. The FST document is basically the consumer, the primary consumer for this document is the development team. And what does this contain? Information on how the software system is to function. So sometimes this might also contain use cases. So I didn't want to bring in use cases today because we are discussing test cases. So it might be slightly confusing. So it's been a deliberate decision to defer the use cases topic to another day, preferably Monday. So keep a note of it. Remind me if you forget. I mean, I'm not going to. I'm sure I'm going to keep an eye on this. But if I do, just please remind me. The FSD document can contain use cases. It might contain wireframes. So we'll discuss what wireframes are, or it might contain screenshots or diagrams like flow charts depicting the final software product. So this is one of our primary sources of how the final software is going to look like. Now we do know what use cases are. Use cases will give an idea of how a particular function is going to be used. Who are the actors, what action can be performed, and what kind of result can be expected. So use cases are written by the developers in order to figure out how a function should work in all of its dimensions. Now coming to wireframes, what are wireframes? See, when there are a lot of visual elements on your application, and in most of the user interface related applications there are. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if there is a page that is a registration page or a search feature page, there might be like 12 to 20 or 12 to 15 fields on this, right? Because there is the name, there's the first name, last name, date of birth, address, phone number, then there's work information, then there is some sort of registration information. So there's a lot of fields, a lot of data. Now if I have to explain each of them in terms of paragraphs or text, that's going to take me a lot of effort, and it is prone to errors because sometimes the way we express things is not uniform. See, we have a different choice of words. Everybody has a different choice of words. Everybody has a different, usage and understanding, context. All of these things change when you're trying to put things into a paragraph or text format. So that is why in that case what the developer will do is they will create a form. They're usually called forms. So these are nothing but dummy HTML pages in most cases, where they will place all the fields how they should appear on the, if there's a checkbox, if there's a radio buttons to check, or anything like that. So all of these items, they'll place it on the screen, but none of these items will be functional. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if there is an edit box, you probably will not be able to write any content in there. Even if you do, it probably will not submit the results. So this is like an HTML. So as the name indicates, this is a wireframe. So this is just a frame to indicate how this page is going to be, what is the placement, what fields are going to be present, and based on that, you don't have to write a lot of paragraphic text. I mean, when I say you, I mean the developers. They don't have to write a lot of paragraphic text. All they need to do is create a dummy HTML and put it in the FRD so that the context is clear. What the web page is supposed to do is always clear. So if you ask me, do all FRDs have use cases? Do all FRDs have wireframes? Do all FRDs have screenshots or flow charts that will tell you how the data is going to flow? The answer is no. They might contain any of these. They might contain one or more. They might contain all of them. They might contain none of them. So how an FRD document has to be written is not something that the QA team can tell the developers. One of the reasons for that is because we are not the primary consumers. We are the secondary consumers. Because we also have to understand, how the system needs to work. So that is why one of the documents that is available to help us do that is FRD. So that is why we use FRD, but it is in no way built for us. Similarly, the database administrators, the operations team, or the environment support team are all the primary, secondary consumers of the FSD document. So the wireframes and everything, is that clear, team? Okay. All right. So there's primary consumers, there's secondary consumers. So usually every document has a three-step process when you talk about creation. One is the writing of the document itself, or the creating of the document, followed by the review, followed by the sign-off. Sign-off is nothing but approval or finalizing of this document. So in this process, the writing is done by the BA and the development team. The review, in the sense, see, there are two forms of review. One is review on an FYI basis, or for your information basis. So this is the case with the QA team. So they are only sharing the business, the functional specification document on a for your information basis. So they're not asking for the QA team's approval. On the other hand, there is another form of review that requires the approval. Right? So usually for FSD document, the approvers can be the project manager, the client, actually these two people most of the times, but then since this is again a process that happens outside the control of the QA team, so you cannot say that we are not going to consume the document unless it's approved or unless the PM has taken a look at it, none of that. So if there's a finalized document available, we use it. So the writing part is done by the business analyst and the developer. The review part is done by the PM and the approval. The sign-off is also provided by them. So even though the QA team reviews it, but that's only on a for your information basis, it is not to seek our approval. It is only after the document is signed off, that is when the final FRD is shared with the QA team. Now the final FRD is shared with the QA team in the sense there are different modes of sharing. One is you could just receive an email with the document or the location to the document, and as I said, these documents are huge, so it's not wise to send them through an email. So usually these documents are uploaded to a common location and the link is sent out. So usually the sharing mechanism in the form of an email is done for projects which have had some previous versions. So let's say it's the GoToTraining software that we are working on. So the GoToTraining, if the previous version was say 12 and the version right now is coming up is 13. So for 13 a new FSD is written, but the QA team already has some prior experience testing version 12. So there is no need for somebody to walk you through point by point on how the software is going to behave. So for software systems that are already in existence, and if it is just a new version of the existing product that you're testing, the usual method of sharing is via an email. But if it is a new project or a new application, then the business analyst will walk the QA team through it, and this happens in the form of a meeting. Either it is a virtual or a physical meeting where the business analyst will walk you through it. So today the walkthrough process will be something like how I'm going to walk you through a sample FSD document that we have. This is for the CARS project, one of the live applications that we have. Now before we go any further, what I want to set the expectation from this activity is that this document does not talk a lot about the functionality of the CARS site itself. Now the reason why we kept it that way is because see, the way things are working on Car Guruji site is something that you will see on the document itself. I mean, there's something that you'll see on the application itself. So you kind of can infer that inventory is for viewing inventory and all that. Of course, a certain sort of documented proof would always be helpful. But what we thought would be much more helpful is, for us to identify the elements of this document that are important for us and the ones that are not important. So just work with me here and we'll go through this document and we'll see how the QA team can consume this document for further processing and further QA steps. Before that, Emilio's question is, are FSD and FRD? Yes, they are the same thing. Different projects refer to them different way. FSD is functional specifications document, FRD is functional requirements document. Both are one and the same. So whenever you're creating, Dev and the BA will write the FSD? Yes. For every document, always check the version. So for any official formal testing or any of the formal IT documents, always check the version. Always make sure that you have the right version, because see, when you're trying to write your test cases or when you're trying to design your tests based on an older version of your FSD, that's going to be counterproductive. You're not going to get accurate results. So before you review any document, always keep an eye out on what version that you're consuming, and is that the latest version or is that the version that you're supposed to use. So it's just a one-point check. Talk to your BA or talk to your developer, get a confirmation that the document that you are seeing and the document that they intend you to see are one and the same or not. Again, this is also another pointer. A lot can be derived from taking a look at the table of contents. Agreed that this document is just 5 pages long, but imagine if you had a document that was 1,000 pages long. Now in that case, it does not make sense to just go over the whole document or to just scroll up and down to find out where you want to land up. So just take a look at the contents and you'll get a good idea of how content is organized in this document, and if there is a specific area that you want to just go to, you could just always use the links in here. And then you will notice this a lot for all official documents. There's always the purpose of the document, as the very first section. So here it is giving us a clear-cut idea about what the scope of this document is, how you can use it, what you can use it for, and what is that you're going to find, what is that you're not going to find. So this is similar to when you use the websites or something, there's a site map, so it will give you an idea of where things are, how things are organized. So this is similar to that. Now it says that the very first thing that the FSD document says that this is not a project plan, and this is just a guide for system architecture and development. So you see here there is no mention of QA. They're not saying that this is a guide for the QA team or anything, because it really is not. They're just making this document because they want to have some sort of theoretical documented foundation to begin with their development of the software product. And this is not for phase-seek timelines or deliverables. So all of that information you would normally find it in your project plan, not in here. So it's also talking a little bit about how this document is organized and what you'll find where. Moving on. So before we go any further, I want to set some rules, which is always keep in mind the 100% test coverage, and the output that is expected out of the FRD review activity is that you should have identified requirements. Okay, so these are two things. So keep an eye out for whether or not we are covering all the requirements and that we are identifying them in the first place. So the very first thing that the FRD says is that the overall goal of this project is threefold. It needs to attract and excite diverse audience, provide useful, timely content in a compelling, easy-to-use design, allow the site users to maintain more site content using their web browser. Now, do you think this information is important to us, team? Yes or no? Okay. Do you think this is something that, do you think this is a requirement? Okay. Since the popular opinion seems to be yes, what kind of requirement do you think this is? This is a business requirement. See, this is something that, let's say the car dealer would come to you and say, see, I want more audience to come. I want this to have a great design. I want this to the site. I mean, I say, for example, I have to add a new car to the inventory. It doesn't mean that I have to run to a developer or a database, somebody who manages the database to include that information. The dealer themselves should be able to maintain the content using their web browser, right? That should be one of their requirements. So these are business requirements. So now that we know that these are business requirements, let's perform the activity of a little bit of a feasibility analysis. Now, requirements, business, technical, or functional requirements, all of them fall into our arena. We have to definitely take them into consideration. But before we do that, we do a little bit of a feasibility analysis. Now, when I have to feasibility analyze these, for testers, the feasibility analysis factors are pretty simple. Testable or not. So that's the decision we are trying to make here. So with point 1, do you think this is testable, team? Attract and excite diverse audience? No. So this is where this requirement fails its feasibility analysis. The reason being, this is ambiguous. How can you say, first of all, what do you mean by diverse? Then what do you mean by audience? So these are some of the things that, we have to be really keep an eye out for. So whenever you see a requirement, it's got to be tangible. It's got to be proved yes or no. So unless that is the case, we will not be able to test it. The next thing is, again, along the same lines, provide useful, timely content in a compelling, easy to use design. Now, in that case, my first question is, what is compelling and what is easy? Right? Because what is easy to you might be extremely difficult to me. For a carpenter, building a chair might be extremely easy, but for me, it's like, I probably will never be able to do it in my life. So easy is something that we cannot define. And when you cannot define something, you cannot test, because there are no maybes when it comes to software. It is either a black or a white. There's no gray in here. So since this is also not testable, we have no. So allow the Car Guruji site users to maintain most site content using their web browser. Again, most site content, what do you mean by most? How much is most? So again, these are all ambiguous requirements. However, the only reason we can make the only way in which we can make the most of these requirements is to remember that these are the end goals of the business, or the business owner or the client. So this is something we can keep in the back of our mind and look for while you're testing based on your judgment, but this is not something that we can test and give a pass or fail yes or no criteria. So these requirements, the business requirements, they fail the feasibility analysis, which means that they are not going to be a part of the requirements that we are going to test for. So we are not going to consider them. Moving on. So is this the BS job? No, it's nobody's job actually. I mean, it's frankly speaking, it is the job of the business owner to determine that in the UAT testing. So but then, while you're testing, as I said, just orient yourself to what the end goals of the business owner are, and try to think along what is easy for them and what is compelling for them. So try to keep that in mind. But since it's not testable, there's nothing we can probably practically do about it. And as I said, this is not even the BS job, it is the job of the UAT users testing and coming up at the end. Next, it's the audience. So here the audience is, usually documents have this audience section can be ambiguous sometimes, because this audience, either it is talking about the kind of audience who are going to consume the product itself, in this case the car site, or it can talk about the audience for this document who are going to use this document. So always just read this a little carefully and see who this is intended for. In this case, the audience this is talking about is the end users for the car site itself. So this says the cars users for this, the target users for this site will be anyone over 18 years of age. They will be a novice web user. Okay, they will also access the internet every day. Part of the goal is to open more audience. So again, a little bit of reference on what kind of application are we building. The next thing that you're seeing here is hardware and hosting. It says Car Guruji servers will be hosted at some company site, and they'll have two servers, one for the code and another for the database. Do you think these are requirements, team, section 2.2? Okay, so if there are requirements, do you think they're relevant to us? No, so this is probably for the environment team to give them a heads up on, how they're planning to host this system. So this is also not relevant for us. The next thing is Car Guruji must allow visitors easy access to all information. Again, nothing quantifiable, so that's also a sentence that we're not going to use. And it also says, as a general rule, no piece of content should ever be more than three clicks away from the visitor. Is that testable, team? Yes, because 3 is a definitive number, and that is something that you can absolutely test. So here comes our requirement number 1. Now, one of the best ways in which I deal with FRD reviews is I don't like to go back and forth with the FRD document over and over again. So, I just want to review it once and review it good and not have to go back to it over and over again. So there is a small intermediary process that I normally recommend in my projects to make this activity of FRD review very effective. So what I like to do is I would create an FRD section number or something like that. I would create so this is something that I found in section 3.1, and the requirement is this. And I also do a serial number thing so that see, this is in the FRD document, all of this is appearing in a text format. So what I'm trying to tell you is here, when this is happening in a text format, as you can see, this is a requirement that has to be eventually put to test. But then the requirement is not ID'd, or there is no unique identifier. So for us to keep moving on, we just need to have some sort of an identification to refer to it in some way. So that is why I like to establish, some sort of an informal numbering system followed by the FRD section number. The reason why I incorporate this is because, normally I wouldn't want to go back to the FRD and, reread something one more time. But what if I have to? In a 100 pages document, if say I picked up on some, particular requirement and I want to go back and read and get additional clarity on it, I should have a mechanism, something that will help me go back and trace it. So here the easiest way I found is using the paragraph number, but if your FRD does not even have that, you can use page numbers, you can use the exact word count, you can use any of these anything else that will help you be able to find that requirement easily the next time you want to go back to it. So this is something that I normally do, and also if I have to make any comments, like if I want to write a few more details about it, say when the business analyst have clarified, let's say, a certain question on how this requirement should work, I'll simply go ahead and write a comment on it, just so I have a way to remember what was happening in the FRD review meeting. Now, yesterday when we saw the test scenario document, there was also a format like this. There were also columns and everything. But that is a formal step in the testing process. This one is not. So this is just something that I call the FRD review outcome. This is not a formal step. Nobody, insists that you will have to create this. This is something that I normally do, and I feel like it helps. So I'm just trying to pass that on to you all. And Sohini's question is 100% test coverage. On what aspects do we check coverage? Requirements, always. For functional testers, our focus is always requirements. So the next thing it says is we have built a site structure that emphasizes what the visitors most want to see, simplifies navigation, but still allows quick access to all content. And the next thing that it says is first level navigation will be as follows. So normally, if this were to be a comprehensive 100% complete FRD document, you would see that each of these features would have been elaborated at this point of time. Since it's not, they are not, but just work with me here and assume that they have all been, accurately defined. I'll just go ahead and include that in my FRD review outcome, where I make a list of all the things that I have to check. Again, I will give them a serial number just so I have a way to uniquely identify each one of them. Similarly, there's admin module, there is dealer module. So I would normally make a note of all of the requirements that I'm finding in those, detailed analysis or detailed text that is explaining me what this module is supposed to do. Sorry. Now this is what I find most interesting. So since this is a web-based application, design always plays a major role. Like I was telling you, usability is normally dependent on how the site is designed, and if there are any usability issues, the design is what needs to get modified. See, the other day I was telling you how in the beginning of Safari or iPhone browser, as soon as you enter the text, the next button was cancel. So when you entered the URL and hit cancel, it was a cause for major frustration for a lot of users. But then now that has changed, and there's an arrow mark that will, that is right next to the URL, and it kind of takes you to the page. So this kind of design changes or this kind of design specifications are very, very crucial when it comes to web applications, and of course for mobile applications as well. Now, if you could recollect, what we talked about the different forms of testing in class 2 or 3, I'm not sure, 3 I believe. So what did we say? Did we say that usability was functional or non-functional? We said it's a non-functional form of testing. So do you think based on that, based on that guideline, do you think we should really get into the site design section, or do you think we don't have to? Because design usability is non-functional, so do we have to consider this or not? Okay, so since most of you think no, this is where the contradiction comes for system testers or QA teams like us. Now, as QA teams, we mostly perform system testing, which means the functional testing, more or less. But again, in most companies, 99% of the companies, we are the only testing team there is. There might not be an additional usability testing. There might not be a performance testing team. There might not be any other testing, specialized testers. In other words, non-functional testing. Can you hear me now, team? You know what? This was actually my fault, not the go to training. There's this mute button on my headphones that I accidentally hit. Sorry about that. So coming back to discussing what the design is. So what I was telling you is, see, sometimes in a project there might not be independent specialized teams existing to perform usability testing and all that. So in that case, if we don't get into this section, when we are the only testing teams available, do you think we still follow the 100% test coverage rule, team? The answer is no, because see, sometimes, I mean, in most of the projects, when I worked, and there are some some performance-related requirements, the client used to first come to the QA team, the primary functional testing team, and they used to ask, hey, you know what, there's just one of these performance related requirement, would you be able to perform it? Because most of the times they don't want to bring in an additional team and it's just one or two requirements. So in that case, it is always the job of the primary QA team, which is us, to make sure that we at least make a list of things and tell them, hey, these need to be tested, even though we are not testing them directly. So no section of the FRD is off limits to the QA team. The only question being testable or not testable. At this point of time, the classification of whether or not it is functional requirement, whether or not you are going to test it or not, all of this is immaterial. When there is a requirement in your FSD, and when you know that you have to test it, you will have to make a note of it. So let's work through this list and see the different situations that we might encounter. Again, the first line says it must deliver a compelling user experience, it cannot sacrifice usability and accessibility. Again, some sort of text, nothing quantifiable, so we are going to move past it. And it also says the website look must conform to the following requirements. The first thing it says is the site should be HTML 4.0 compliant. However, this is an older document, so right now it's HTML 5.0 compliant that all websites are looking for. Nevertheless, so if this is a requirement you see, let's try to break it down. The very first question is, can it be tested? Yes or no? It is definitely something that can be tested. Now, following that, my other question is it something that the QAs can test? Or for that matter, will I be able to test it or will you be able to test it? Do you think so? Yes or no? Because, we probably see if there is a developer converted tester who knows HTML, then that is a happy or lucky accident and they will be able to test it. But if not, if it is QAs like me who have no prior development experience, then I will definitely will not be able to test it. Even if I do, I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong. So at this point of time, I know that this is a testable requirement, but I also know that this might not be something that I will be able to test. So it does not matter whether you can test it or not, but as long as it is testable, we make a note of it. And in the comments, we can say that either the dev can test this or give us instructions how to do this. So how will we know what we can test for and what we cannot test? So anything quantifiable can be tested. Anything buildable can be tested. So Give me an example of something, if you tell me any random requirement that comes to your mind, and we will analyze this. Okay, while you're doing that, I'll just move on to the next one. All pages must load in less than 10 seconds over a 56K modem connection. So again, in extension to your question, 10 second, is that definitive or not? It is definitive, isn't it? 10 seconds is 10 seconds no matter what. So if a connection is taking, if a page is taking more than 10 seconds, like if it's taking 15 seconds, do you know that it's not the expected behavior or not? We will be fairly, in a good position to make that judgment. So all the requirements for which you can make that judgment, they are the ones that can be tested. Now, how can we test it? We don't know yet. We are only identifying the requirements at this point of time. And also this kind of requirements will give you an indication that when you are preparing for setting up your test environment, you're going to need a 56K modem connection. So this will set you up and prepare you for even getting started with your testing environment. So if it helps, you can make another column and talk about any special requirements are necessary, or environment requirements. If there are any, you can make a note of them corresponding to it. So you can use this document any way you like. Try to make the most of it, because creating documents, it takes time, even though it is a copy paste effort. Even still, invest some time in making a concrete document so that you don't have to go back to the step that followed before this. So there will only be a moving forward, not backward. So again, the next one. All pages must fit in a web browser displayed on a computer set to 640 by 480. Testable? Absolutely. Then again, all web pages must use a web safe color palette. Definitely testable, because when we say web safe, I'm sure there exist parameters to check that. So definitely yes. The next thing that this thing says is that the site must be compatible with Internet Explorer 4, 5, 5.5, Firefox, and all that. What kind of testing is this, team? It's the browser compatibility testing. Thank you, Emilio. So usually websites, see, this happens with most sites. The other day I was trying to do an ICICI transfer. I mean, I've said this example so much and you might have heard it already. I was trying to do an ICICI transfer and the transfer wouldn't go through. I called the customer care and they simply said, use Internet Explorer. So sometimes some of the functionality might not work in some browsers, which can be frustrating. I mean, I would rather not have called their bank, which is all the way in India, and it would have saved me a lot of trouble had I thought like a tester and just tried and used a different browser. But browser compatibility testing is a very important part of testing web applications and even mobile apps. Actually, there are a lot of options available. Different OSs, mobile operating systems, they are compatible with different browsers. So that's something that is definitely part of our system. Now, having said that, do you think it is like possible to test all the exhaustive list of functions in each of this browser, and for that matter all the browsers? It's not possible. So usually the clients will tell you that which browsers they are mostly interested in. So how this browser compatibility testing goes on is, let's say the popular browsers for at least web-based applications are, for MacBooks it's Safari, for normal Windows systems it's Chrome, IE, and Firefox. I mean, there are others, but these are the things that people commonly use. So the client will say these four are the browsers that we are looking at. So it is up to the tester judgment. Now, I mean, if this was a situation that I was dealing with, I would divide this into two major areas. One is I would test it on a Mac, and then I would test it on, Windows machine, because there are two different platforms. You want to be sure. So I would have a team test the 100% requirements, all of them on Safari, and if there are any browsers available for Mac, those would be left behind. So initially one browser you would test it 100%. So in Windows I would say test the application 100% on Chrome, and then on the rest of the browsers like IE and Firefox here, I would simply do a sanity test, not the 100%, because again, that we don't have that much time. If you had the luxury of time, you could test it in all 4 browsers 100%. But since we don't, what I would do is I'll just do one browser 100% and the rest of them I'll just do a sanity test and give like a high level overview of what might work, what might not work. But this is See, somebody asked me what is a test strategy. This exactly, coming up with decisions like that, is test strategy. So here there are all of these browsers that are showed here. So there's Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, version 4.0 and later. So if you look at the Chrome browser now, I think the current version is 20 or something. Let's look at that. So the current version is actually 31. So if I have to check from 4 to 31, that's not going to make sense to me. So I'm going to have to come up with a version that I'm going to check with 100% on all of that. So the clear-cut coming up with the clear-cut guidelines on how to test, at what time to test, what data to use in order to test, all of that is nothing but a test strategy. Test strategy is a portion of your test plan, but more on that tomorrow. Tomorrow, entire day, we are going to discuss the test plan and everything. So we'll talk more on it when we get there. Sandhya's question is, so the QA lead comes up with the strategy. It is not always just the QA lead. Say for example, you are made the in charge to check the site design requirements. So you can come up with a strategy yourself. So the most experienced, the most insightful, the person who has a lot of, the person who is best suited to handle a particular functionality, I think they are the best ones to come up with a strategy. Again, the hierarchies, the ranks, they don't work most of the times. It's about who's the best man for the job. That's it. So efficient strategy, does it come with experience? Sometimes yes. So you couldn't hear, team, right now. Can you hear me? So where did we miss out? Sorry, team. No, this time it's not my fault. I haven't muted it, but I don't know. So the question was, does QA lead come up with the strategy? As I was saying, yeah, thank you, Emilio. As I was saying, there is really, no ranking or no one person who will do this job. It comes with, experience. It comes with insight. It comes with knowledge, whoever is most knowledgeable. So it's just about finding the right man for the job. So if you were in charge of the design module, and if you kind of do your own research and figure out that this is what will work best, then you would come up with a strategy. So it's not like the QA lead will do it, but you will have your team members help, and the QA lead will overlook the entire process anyways. So that's how it's going to work. And now I will make a list of this requirement in my FRD, whatever document this is called. I would do that, and then I would make a list in the environment requirements saying that on my test machines I would need IE, Firefox, and Chrome, the versions, the exact version. So not only is FRD document prepping me to figure out what the requirements are, it is also preparing me to come up with, what kind of requirements I would need in my QA environment. What kind of environment requirements will I need? Then it says the site must conform to WAI accessibility guidelines whenever possible. Now tell me, team, what kind of testing is this? It's actually accessibility testing. So if you remember what we talked about the other day, accessibility testing is about whether or not a website conforms to the WWW standards. So if you are interested in knowing what those standards are, give this a page a visit, and there you will see that all the guidelines are listed. So when something is so clear-cut, guidelines are clearly listed, so you will definitely be able to test it. So at this point of time, we don't know how, but we will make a list of it. So you see, we are making a list of performance requirements, compliance requirements, compatibility requirements, accessibility requirements. So why does it say whenever possible? Yes, that is an ambiguity. So yes, which brings me to the next thing. So this is an inconsistency that you found. So Sandhya feels like, whenever possible is ambiguous. What do you mean by whenever? I mean, is it like once in a week, or how is it? So when you figure out that there is an inconsistency in your document, you can actually, this is an opportunity for us to report it back to the BA and get the confirmation. So you can actually go back to your business analyst and say, what do you mean by whenever possible, or is that term even necessary in this document? Do you need to revisit that, or do you need to come up with a certain guideline that is much more clear cut? So yes, FRD review not only is targeted at identifying requirements, but if you find that there are any inconsistencies, this is a opportunity to raise a red flag and make sure that it is addressed. So that's a good catch. Again, all pages should be available for search engine robots. Again, this is dependent on the meta tags and all that. So yes, and then the next thing is all pages that use static images should be displayed correctly. Again, we can easily test that. So yeah, that those are all the requirements that we have in the FRD here. And at the end of it, I would pretty much have like a digest of the entire FRD content, and I know which feature works like best. Now the question that normally comes to me is how we talked about FRD documents being few thousands of pages. So if there are few thousands of pages, usually participants ask me, do you think everybody is responsible for all the 1,000 pages? What do you think, Ting? Do you think everybody has to know what's in all the 1,000 pages? No, because we are all working in a team framework. So if everybody is doing the same thing, we are losing out on precious time. So that is why, again, no sound. Sorry, team. I don't know what's going on. Okay. So yeah, what was I saying? So usually it is the team lead who will initially break it down, divide work, and say that you are responsible for so and so modules. But usually during the FRD review phase, everybody is involved, because not only should you be an expert at your particular module, but you should also be in a way that you understand the overall system. So in the FRD review section, you are required to attend the entire meeting or go through the entire document, but you will be responsible for your own module, and you will be responsible for writing test scenarios for your own module, but not necessarily for the entire project. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the FRD review session. Any questions? Anything that you want me to repeat? All good, team? Okay, great. Okay. So for those requirements that are not functional, yes, there are different ways in which you can handle it. One is you can say that, hey, these are the requirements that are listed out in the FRD document, and you can tell the project manager, overall project manager, and tell them that these are the requirements that are there. You might want to find somebody who will test these. So you can just hand over the responsibility of those requirements to the project manager and have them direct it in any way that they see fit. On the other hand, if they tell you that why don't you just do this sort of a performance testing, then do your own analysis here. Is it something that I can do? So 10 minutes, so if a page has to load in 10 seconds, surely I can do that. All I need is a stop clock and sit there and see how it works out, right? Is it coming in the 10 seconds or not? So if that is as simple as that, then we probably will be able to accommodate. But if it's not, if you have to monitor the network resources, you can just let them know that these are all the complications, this is why I cannot do. In which case they will either assign you somebody to work with who will be able to do that, and you will be able to sign off and say yes, it's happening the way it should, or they will do it and they'll let you know what the results are, and you can confirm that. So that kind of thing is possible. So in an IT team, there is no one way in which things happen always. It's always a team decision. So when something is not happening, when something's not working, all we have to do is just escalate it to the right channel, and things will get resolved. So if a new team gets into scene to test non-functional requirements, they will use same kind of analysis for non-functional requirements we are covering now. No. Usually, okay, that is a great question. So usually any non-functional requirements like performance, usability, security, all these are followed by functional testing. So see, if I'm performing, let's say it's a simple calculator, I'm adding a plus b. So 2 plus 1 if I'm adding. If the result is showing 5, this is clearly wrong. This is clearly wrong at a very basic functional level. What is the point if the result is coming in like 1 milliseconds or, half millisecond, or, it's coming, in a way that it is hard to discern for a naked eye. It doesn't make any sense, even if it is great in performance, even if the site is super easy to use. So usually non-functional requirements, non-functional testing is followed by functional testing. So they wouldn't consider, our functional requirements. However, even to perform non-functional testing, you need to know the functionality of the application. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you're trying to see how many users can log in at the same time, you still need to know how login functionality works. So your non-functional teams will be, their extent of expertise or their extent of involvement in the functional requirements will be to understand how this works. But they will not go into minute details like username, correct details or incorrect details they are entering, and checking for error message coming up. All that extent of testing, that extent of requirement coverage is not done. So no. So Shubha's question is, if FRD and FSD are the same, then why do we have to segregate? No, we don't have to segregate at all. So teams either have an FSD or an FRD. They have a requirements document which they either call an FRD or FSD. Does that make sense? So Hini, I don't understand your question. Can you type again? Can we have form? So try to type that again, and I'll try to answer that. So do we give preference, or is an order in which we do testing? For example, system testing then. So always first is, no, system testing is a phase in which, the application is available as a whole. So in the system testing phase, functional testing can happen and non-functional testing can also happen. So system testing is not synonymous with functional testing at all. Having said that, functional testing, as I was telling you, always precedes every other form of testing. So what is the formal definition for test strategy? So we'll discuss that tomorrow. Just give me, because it is much better to discuss test strategy when the context is appropriate. I know Emilio is also looking for an answer to that question, but we will see that tomorrow. Just please be patient for a few more minutes, of course for a day. So will they use the same kind of procedures? No, of course not. They are not going to write test cases like we do. They're not going to, they're not going to enter the data like we do. It's because the kind of results that they are looking for is totally different. So in case of functional testing, so usability testing, let's take that, because functional testing, sounds like it's too technical, but usability testing, the way things are performed. As I was saying, the calculation. In the calculator application, the addition operation will be taken, and then the users, the kind of users that we are choosing are important. I mean, of course, simple A plus B addition anybody can do, but let's assume it's much more difficult. So in that case, the choice of users, like I might choose a mathematician. I might choose somebody who is, you know, um, somebody who's not into math, a biologist. Of course, as I said, everybody will know addition, but just for the sake of, for example, and I might also choose like different age groups. I might choose somebody between 12 and 18, or I might choose somebody who's older. I might choose somebody who is, a senior, that sort of thing. So the user decision is first part of it. And then the next thing is conducting the test. So you want to give them an operation to perform, a sample operation to perform. So you will have to decide what operation this is, and then you will have to decide a monitoring method. So are you going to have like them fill up a form at the end of it, or are you going to look at their screen while they're performing the operation? So how the procedure of the particular test happening, it is different for different non-functional forms of testing. Team, is the voice really bad? Because for me, it's showing me 100%. So, okay. Did you all miss anything? Was there something that you want me to repeat? Okay. And compatibility testing, Surbhi, do you still have a question on compatibility testing? So compatibility testing is nothing but you'll perform the same operations just on a different browser. So in fact, I would invite you to do this. Why don't you open a site both on IE and Chrome in parallel, do the exact same things, and see if you're seeing if one browser is performing better to the other, or if one operation is not being handled by the other. So give that a try. Sometimes when I'm uploading the video to the GoToTraining, when I do it in Chrome, it gets stuck at 72%. So if things are not moving from 72%, I know that it's not working in Chrome. So I close it and I reopen the site in Internet Explorer, and it uploads really quickly. So browser compatibility testing is nothing but the website should work without any issues. So it should work exactly the same way in all the browsers. If it's not, it's a defect. So this 72% upload issue, when I encountered it like for extended period of time, I reported it to GoToTraining. Of course, I never heard back, but that becomes an issue. So if the site is performing the way it should, or if it is being effective in one browser, it should be effective in the other also. So that's all. You'll do the same sequence of steps. You'll do everything same, just in a different browser. That's all. Make sense? Okay. So FRD review outcome. So once you've created this document, what is the next step, team? So now we have requirements. What's the next step in the testing process? It is identifying what to test. So testing is a three-step process. Test scenarios. Thank you. Testing is a three-step process. One is identify or find the requirements. Next is write your test scenarios. The third step is to write your test cases. So you first identify requirements, figure out what to test in each of these, and then how to test. So this is true of all forms of testing. So so for a usability testing, you know that it needs to be usable. So what do you have to test? Is the function being usable? Is it something that is easy to use? Is it something that is easy to learn? Is the experience satisfactory? So you know what to look for in that functionality. Then you move to test cases, or how to test. As I was talking about earlier, what user groups to select, what operation to give them, how to monitor the results, how to capture the results. So all of this becomes part of the answering the question how. So now that we have the requirements finalized, the next step is to go for test scenario. Remi's question is test scenario and scope the same? more or less the same, because we are trying to identify what to test, and that's pretty much what the scope is. So more or less the same. Deepti, the FRD document for e-commerce site, there's not going to be a lot of difference, because when you look at it, this document does not really talk about the car site, right? So all you have to do is just insert the e-commerce name. The real takeaway, as I was telling you earlier, from this document is to orient us towards how to identify requirements, what should be our mindset, and how to process this document and consume it for the next sequence of steps. So there's not a lot of difference. Okay. So the next step is to write test scenarios. We already know how to do this, but there are some difficulties that, few of you have had. So I thought this will be a good chance to, identify those and, iron out if there are any questions. So if you've had any questions regarding test scenarios, now is a good time to discuss those. So the input for the test scenario creating activity is requirements. Getting a hold on the requirements. This could be through FRD review, or if it is an agile project, this could be through the product or sprint backlog. So spend as much time as you can with your FRD document team. So that is seriously a suggestion that will go a long way, because the more you understand the system, the better you can test it. So whatever helps you, like talking to the developer, talking to the business analyst, whatever helps you understand the system in a much enhanced fashion, go ahead and do all that you can do to understand it. So once you have the requirements, the other inputs that you need to have before we get to the test scenario creation is to have a template. And template creation is also a team activity. It's not something that we do by ourselves, or something that I decide I want to do this and I go ahead and do it while the team is doing something else. So template, to give you a recap of what template includes, it will first and foremost include a format like the XLS that we are using, and certain columns and the way the data is going to be organized. The typical columns in a test scenario template are test scenario ID, test scenario description, positive or negative parameters, attribute setting. There's also the importance. So part of the template creation process is to define what values fields like importance would take, and also number of test cases. So number of test cases is nothing but an approximation of how many tests can come up with one aspect that you're looking to test. So you can give an approximation here. So I see that a lot of you have had trouble setting the exact number of test cases. I'll try to repeat that, so maybe it'll make more sense. So there's positive, negative, importance, number of test cases, all of these. If you want, you could expand this document, or the data fields to include things like who is the responsible tester and all of that. So in addition to the template, you would also need to know who is responsible for which module. So basically you will need to know what module you need to work on. You'll also need to know if there are any deadlines, if there are other guidelines. If there's any other guidelines that you will have to follow, you will need to know that. So once you have all of, so where do you think you'll get this information about who is responsible for which module, if there are any deadlines or guidelines and all that? This is something that your QA lead will be able to provide that information. Now when I get this to the point, participants ask me, can I choose the module that I want to work on, or the team lead will assign something and I have no choice? So in a QA environment, in an IT work style, there's never any impositions. So we are free to put forth our opinions or our interests, and as a team combined effort, we'll all try and work out what you need. But the only thing I'll suggest is, if you are interested in working on a module, know the most about it and be forthright about your interest in working on it further. The output of this phase is, of course, a test scenario document. Now, again, test scenario document is also, a formal document, which means there is the write step, review step, and approve step. So who do you think writes this document? So that part is clear. QA team members, correct? Who do you think reviews this document, team? Do you think test scenarios get documented at all? Srikanth says business analyst. Okay, so now is the time where we can, the QA lead, BAs, okay. So the answer is usually they will undergo a peer review, which means a team member, a QA team member, another QA team member will review this and approve or say that, this is fine. So the reviewer and approver are most of the times the same. So this is something that gets reviewed by the QA team, and this is something that gets reviewed by your peer, and then you approve it. Now, we talked about the reason why we create test scenarios is that we need this to be an intermediary step between requirements and the test cases. Test cases is the final output. That is where we want to reach, eventually. And the test scenarios also help with estimating or test planning, because right now we are saying these many number of test cases are going to come up. So we kind of have an idea that this many test cases will need this much of time to document, how many are important, how many are not important. So you'll also get a good idea of the complexity. You'll also know how much work you're dealing with, so you can plan better. So this is for estimating and test planning also. However, do you think this is a deliverable or not? Now, deliverable is any document or output that is shared with teams other than QA team. So the QA team is going to prepare the test scenario document. Do you think this is a document that we need to share to any other external team? What do you think? So there is a mixed opinion, but usually this is the document that is not shared by anybody else, because this document, when you look at it, does not have any real use value except to plan. So that is why, as I was saying yesterday, you don't have to go to a lot of detail in your test scenario document. You can just get a high level, because this is just an intermediary step. This is what helps you transition into your test cases eventually. So what I find useful is the 3-point check. So I have a 3-point check that I normally use to determine whether or not a certain output is a deliverable or not. One is it providing any information to an external team? Like, is it an FYI based document? Then, is it, waiting on an external team's input? So, are we providing this any information to anybody as an FYI? No, because nobody needs to know how we are going to strategize our test cases, what we are going to test in it, so no. And is it waiting for an external team's input? No. And do we need anybody's approval on this? No. So that is why test scenarios document is not a deliverable. So even if one of these 3 criteria is true, then it becomes a deliverable. Similarly, if you have to review the FRD outcome document, now is this providing any information to anybody? No, because this information is already there in the FRD. We are simply making an enhanced note of this, that's all. And does it need anybody's review? Does it need anybody's input? Does it need anybody's approval? No, this is something that we are creating for our ease. So that is why it is not a deliverable. Following the same rule, test scenarios are also not deliverables. And what is the peer review process? How is it performed? We'll see all that going forward. But test scenario documents also get reviewed. So this is a little bit of a recap about the test scenario concept. So taking these test requirements, I'm going to write one. I'll just go ahead and write one test scenario, and we will. I made a list of few things that I wanted to discuss based on your assignments, and I'll take that next. So there was a question on if there are any other formats other than Excel that are used to, or Word that are used to write test scenarios or test cases. Now, as I said yesterday, format content always takes the first place when we are, trying to write any document. So if you have another format that best represents your content, you are free to use. But based on my personal experience, most of the time it is Excel sheets and Word documents. I wouldn't say the others don't work. Um, it's just that I feel it's a comfort issue. And as I was saying, all of these tools like Quality Center and everything, they're compatible with Excel sheets. So all you have to do is simply create your documents and upload them in one click. So that also makes Excel a better candidate to be used for writing your test cases. Now, one example where I saw that most of you suffered was when we were writing the search, test scenarios. Now, it is understandable why there might be a difficulty there, or if not difficulty, at least, to be honest, you might have felt bored writing about, this test criteria, search criteria, because in the search criteria, there are multiple fields. So there is make of the car, there's model, there's year, which is a range from and to. There's price, which is also a range from and to. There's mileage, which is also a range from and to. So when you're looking at search that is this limited, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 fields to deal with, right? So in this 9, there are multiple combinations. You can start with 1, leave the rest empty. The rest 8 of them empty, or you can fill 2, leave the rest 7 of them empty. So this is like that bingo song, bingo. So there are like multiple combinations that will happen for you when you're trying to test this. But the way to handle it, at least when you're writing test scenarios, to minimize the time, is to keep it abstract. So search can have one of these results. I mean, 3 possibilities. One is the search results will be displayed correctly. So you have entered a criteria, the search results are coming up. The second way you can break this up into the search results will not, no results will be displayed when you enter a criteria for which there is no matching car available. And the third way this can go is the search results you have entered incorrect or insufficient information into the those text boxes, and then the search will tell you not enough info, or search enter correct data, or some sort of a notification message like that. So here write your test scenarios based on the result, not based on the input. So instead of saying enter 1 criteria and see what's happening, enter 2 criteria, see what's happening, break it down in terms of results. So what I would do here is ts underscore search underscore 01. Sorry about that, team. So what I would write is validate if the Yes. So Emilio, you're right in your observation. So the exact criteria or the exact conditions that we are going to enter to test this, that will come in the test case step. So I've been spelling the validate incorrectly. Something to that effect, but you get the picture. I know I'm not wording it perfectly, but just to give you an idea. And the importance is for matching the correct one, I would say it is high. There was also another question saying that I feel like all the scenarios are high importance. Then how do I make that decision? So yes, you're right. I mean, it will feel like all the functions, all the operations are important to the site. So in that case, what I would say is, again, use your judgment. If you feel like everything, if you absolutely feel like everything must be high importance, there is no harm in assigning everything high. But one of the best practices I generally recommend is to distribute them evenly. So make sure that one third of your test cases have high importance, one third of them low, and one third of them medium. Otherwise, setting these parameters becomes meaningless. But as I said again, there are no hard and set rules. If you feel like they are all, high importance, there's absolutely no other value that can appropriately represent the importance. You can do that. But if you can, try to distribute them evenly. Positive and negative. No, Sohini, you cannot perfectly, say how many test cases this is going to result in. That is humanly impossible, because for these 9, fields that you're seeing here, it's impossible to say, what correct combinations, what incorrect combinations I'm going to enter. So what I'll do here is, this is a negative test case, this is a positive test case. So the number of test case, I'll give an approximation. So how many things do you think I'll search? I'll probably search like, I'll enter all valid data. I'll enter only the mandatory data. I'll enter the data that I'll get like, here and there. So probably I'll check for 4 or 5. So I'll just put 5 just to be on the safe side. So incorrect data, there are multiple ways. Again, I'll just say 10. So this is just an approximation. You don't have to get an accurate value. So even if you do try to get an accurate value, you probably will not be able to. Okay, did I miss any questions? So I will take, so Sohini's question, I think I answered that. So Emilio's question is not even for importance criteria. Does anybody team like BA have a voice here? So the answer is no, because for one, they don't know that we are preparing the test scenario document. But if you feel like you're not able to accurately set the importance field, you do have an option to go back to the BA and get their opinion. But, they will not be able to review this document throughout and tell you, something has to be set in a certain way, because no, this is a backup mechanism that we're creating ourselves to fall back on just in case we don't have enough time to test everything. So BAs don't have an involvement here. But as I said, you can actually go and, talk to them if you'd like. So Sandhya, this is just an approximate number. So here is how I was thinking about it. So if I'm searching, I have make, year, price, mileage, correct? So these are 4 fields that I have, range or not, whatever. Now I can search by filling in all this information, correct? So, or I can search based on just the make, just the year, just the price, just the mileage. So when I enter all, that is one test case. When I enter just, make, year, price, mileage, that's going to be 4 others. So that's how I came up with 5. But again, I might choose to do it with make plus year. I might choose to search with make plus price. So these are all different combinations that can come up, in which case 5 might not even begin to cover what I'm looking at. So I'm looking at 5 test cases, or roughly. There might be more. So Dipti's question is, can't we write all search features in one scenario and write multiple search test cases? You can. You sure can do that. You can say validate the search feature, and then you can go, whatever you like. But then again, you can do that if you'd like, because with test scenarios, you can go to a level of abstraction as much as you like. So that's not going to be a problem. But it will not serve the purpose of bringing a level of clarity on how testing is going to be performed, and positive, negative, are you going to consider that or not? But again, it's up to you. So at this point of number of test cases column, can it not be empty? Can you not estimate later? You can do that. Sometimes when I myself, say for example, I have a test scenario that says validate if the HTML for site is 5.0 compliant, if this is the requirement I'm dealing with, I know that this is what I want to test, but I don't know how to test, so I have no idea how many test cases this is going to result in, so I'm going to leave it empty. There is no rule that you have to fill it, but if you want to make the most of it, you can actually, you if you want to make the most of it and use it for subsequent planning purposes, then it makes sense to do that when you know it, but when you don't, you can absolutely leave it empty. So in the test scenario, we can combine multiple test descriptions for one single button. Yes, you can do that. How do you determine whether it is positive or negative? Sometimes it's confusing. It is confusing sometimes. See, for example, here, if no results are found, then no matching criteria is found. But then again, we talked about how if there's a notification message, we should mark it negative, which means when it says no search results are found, you can either interpret that to be a positive result or negative result. So here again there are no definitives. You can again use your tester's judgment. If this is something you feel like is a negative scenario, you absolutely feel free to set it as negative. It is confusing sometimes, but but depending when you work with the team for a certain period of time, you kind of pick up on these things that for this team and the way we all work, this test case would be negative and this would be positive. Um, so can we not write that it is both positive and negative at the same time? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it would not have any repercussions if you do that. But it's up to you. But something cannot be both positive and negative, because something cannot be both good or bad or yes or no, right? So in that case, your best bet is to leave it empty if you're not being able to determine an accurate value. So you can just leave it empty. So next question is, negative is when we check for a failure. Is my understanding correct? So negative test case is where you're testing for a failure that the site can handle. So when you enter an invalid username and password, that essentially is a failure. But that's a failure your website can handle. So when you're looking for alternate flows that might not be your critical functionality, but the site will still handle nevertheless, that would be negative test scenarios. Okay. A few more things I wanted to tell you all is to incorporate the practice of spell check every time you create a document. This is a kind of a general practice that testers have to incorporate, because on an average, when you compare it with the rest of the teams, we testers go through a lot of documentation, lot more documentation than the rest of the teams do. And also we call ourselves the quality representatives for the entire project or the software. So it does not reflect very well on us if we write our documents and our documents itself has like something as silly as spelling inconsistencies. So try and spell check your Excel sheet every time before you send it out. It is very simple to do that. Those of you who are new to this, let me give you a quick check on how we do this. So select the extent of the document that you want to spell check, review, and just do an ABC spelling. So it will give you all the things that you have misspelled. So DSCs, I'm still okay with that. I'm going to ignore all of them. So you see I spelled validate incorrectly, so I'll just quickly change it and the spell check is complete. So it will take as little as a few seconds, but this is instrumental in, see, when a document has spelling errors, it is very difficult to take that document seriously. Equip your document with the best standards that there are and make this a general practice. More questions I see. Maybe this is but since for planning purposes, in your experience, is there a rule of thumb can be roughly estimated? Not really, because see here, this is pretty random number that I came up with, testing 5, 10, so there is no pretty number like that, but one suggestion that I can definitely make is overestimate but not underestimate, because when you actually get down to the actual work itself, there are a lot more things that you would want to test that probably will not come into your mind when you're reading the FRD document. So always there is a lot more work than we anticipate. So in the interest of time, in the interest of being able to do everything, overestimate but not the underestimate. So that's something that will work. So if you are thinking there might be roughly for testing negative search scenarios, if you feel like there are 10, write 20, because chances are you might really do that. But then depending on the number of test cases, you can actually come up with how many hours that will take. So that's something we'll see tomorrow. Effort estimation based on the count of test cases. That's something I'll introduce you to tomorrow. So this is about the test case scenarios. One last thing that I want to tell about test scenarios is don't write your test scenarios based on the links on the screen or the data. For example, there was a test scenario today that said validate if a Toyota Camry, I don't know if 1000 is a valid model number, but something like that, details are displayed correctly. Do you think this is a correct test scenario, team? So there's a yes or no. The reason why it might be no is because how do you know that there's always going to be a Toyota Camry in the inventory? It might not be there, correct? So you cannot write your test scenarios based on the data. You can write something generic like, validate if the car information is displayed accurately. When the details link is clicked or something like that. But try not to look at the exact same cars that are present or something like that. That is never going to happen. And also think about, now that we have the application, we are looking at it and writing our test cases. But in the real-time scenario, you wouldn't normally have the application at this point of time. You will have to write that, based on a document. So in the document, you will not know what data is going to be present in the system. So that kind of test scenarios are not going to be valid. Quick check. Did I get everything? So search feature. Okay. So I think we got all of that. And Emilio's question again is, what about test scenario document organization? You can organize categories, or does it have to have a value? That's also a good question. See, I was talking about how this document can be uploaded into the websites, into test management software and all that directly. So one of the rules that those softwares will have is to not have blanks. See, if you have a blank, that software will not be able to interpret where it needs to take. So what you can do, try not to have any blanks in your page, and try not to have gaps. And you don't have to create a different module name or anything. Just make sure that you name them appropriately enough so we can get the module. But if you feel like this document is becoming too big, break it into sheets, different sheets. But gaps are not necessary. Spaces are not recommended generally. But if it's just for the manual testing group, you don't have to follow any, no gap policy or anything like that. They can be ignored slightly. So Sohini's question is, this kind of data is mobile, but anything generic can be example of a specific brand. No, brands again are also not generic. Say for example on Amazon, if you're searching for let's say, I don't know, Nike or Nike shoes or something like that, the Amazon might not carry that brand next year. So there is no, you cannot base your tests under brand names or anything that is dynamic. So you will have to write test scenarios in a way that says search for shoes instead of saying you're looking for Nikes. So that sort of thing might work. How do you check if cars are getting updated? You will have to so for some things, when you have to check, you will have to do some actions to enable to check that. So in the practical real time, when you have to do that, like if you really have to test that scenario, what you would do is you would have your developer insert a car into your database, and immediately you'll check on the system if that information is coming up. So to make testing happen, we really do have to perform some background operations. So that's something that you will have to do when testing is happening. So, but cars of same brand have common features. Now cars have common features, brand or not. I don't know. see, I mean, again, if you feel like, there's weight behind your thought, put it to implementation, see if that works. That's the only way to find out. And let me know what you figure out and if there are any particular results that you're seeing, so we can take it forward and analyze that better. But I would, at least at the stage of test scenarios, I like to keep it generic and high level, because this is just to get an idea to how to form a test strategy, to identify the scope and all that, but the real use value of test scenarios is very limited. Okay, so that's all I have about test scenarios. So I'll just move on to writing a quick and easy test case. I know you'll have a lot of questions following this. So what I would do is I'd write one. We'll discuss if there are any, basic questions that we can answer. I know that we are pretty much nearing the end of the session. So anything else, we'll start tomorrow's discussion with the test cases topic itself. Again, first is template creation. Test cases, all of them should have a test case ID, a test case description again. They would have something called a precondition, the test steps, test data, and then the expected result. So again, as I said, this is not going to be the only place we'll discuss test cases. This is just an introduction. There are going to be a lot of other columns in test cases also, but this is what I like to start with. Going forward, we'll develop these as and when we have much more understanding of this concept. Now, test cases, remember, always talk about the how. This means we are giving instructions, or we are writing this in an instruction-based mode. So the voice of the test case, the tone of the test case should always be similar to what you would find in a user manual. So if you have gotten any furniture that you have to fix it yourself, think about how that would how that would read. It will tell you, find this nut and place it in here, and fix it this way. So it is clearly giving you instructions, and that's the tone that test cases also should take. So a test case scenario ID column is not basic here. I'm not sure what that means. So are you asking me, can we not use the same test scenario ID for the test case ID? No, I'm sorry then, I didn't understand that. So test case ID, you would normally start it with T_C, just so you can make a differentiation between what you're writing, whether it is a test case or a test scenario. And then let's say you're right. Let's not start with search because I know that's complicated. We'll start with login because this is something that we all understand. Again, 0102, just a serial number. Test case description is okay. So how do you relate the test case and the test scenario? That's a good question. We'll get there later. But for now, let's treat test case as an independent unit. We'll try to see how we write that, okay? This will describe the objective, the reason why we are performing the test. Okay, so this is to check or to test if the administrator is able to log in when correct login details are entered. So just give a 1 or 2 line definition of what you're trying to achieve via this test case. Now, precondition is all the data or operations that have to hold true for us to continue. So for us to perform this step, what are the things that we absolutely need? So one thing I would need is Chrome browser is installed and launched. So I need you to open, the browser to be available and launched. And the second thing that I would need is admin login credentials. So this could be, in terms of software being available, data being available, anything that you feel like you need, or preparatory steps that need to happen for us to be able to perform this step. You can include all of them in the precondition. Test steps start with one. Of course, the very first step is to enter the URL, and the data here is that you would enter So if you're wondering why I kind of use only the car site always, the reason is this is something that we've had for a long time. So I'm more kind of drawn to it without me consciously thinking about it. And the steps always talk about the action that we need to perform. Data will talk about the input that we need to supply to the particular step, and expected result is the outcome of performing this step. So when I enter the URL and I don't know what the option is, let's assume I would hit go. Then what is the expected result? Site is launched and the home page is displayed. The second step is click on the admin link from the left navigation. Usually the way websites are talked about is all that you're seeing this site, like my training, scheduler training, that's usually called the left navigation menu, and anything that you're seeing on the top is called the main menu. So the admin option is usually present on the left navigation menu. So we'll pick it from there. So when I click on the left navigation menu, what's admin login link on the left nav? What is supposed to happen is that the admin login page is displayed. Then I would enter the username. Team, can you all hear me? Okay. Enter the password. So since when I enter the username or password, nothing is really happening on the site, the expected result column can be left empty. And then I will click sign in or login or OK or whatever the corresponding button is. And then so the admin is logged in successfully and the admin homepage is displayed. So this is how you normally write test cases. So you see this exact data that we are going to supply, the exact sequence of operations that you're going to perform, and the exact output that is expected out of each step. So this is the basic way in which test cases are written. Do you have any questions in this process, team? So the test case ID is not blank. It's TC underscore log. Oh, for all of these columns you say? No, these you will have to do some formatting here. Like I don't want to confuse you, especially those of you who are new to Excel, not to worry about this step. Usually there's just one ID for the entire test case, and the step number is this. Okay. We do check negative test cases. So if I have to write like, invalid login, here's what I'm going to do. So all of these steps would pretty much remain the same for me. I of course don't need the header. So I'll just put an incorrect password. For additional measure, I'll incorporate that in the step also. All the steps preceding that will be the same. Only the expected result for the last one is different. It would say The admin login fails and the error message. So that's how you would write, your negative test case. So at the test case level, it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. But if you want to include that differentiation, you can just also write a positive or negative column and write whether it is positive or negative. But I don't see a real, I don't know. If you want to, you could do that. So Hini's question is, how do we identify test cases? Based on your requirements, based on your test scenarios, and based on your understanding of the application. So FRD will have a lot of information, so you can use that. So if you're asking me practically right now in the class, how do you do it? Look at the application. So test scenarios document is the input document to identify all test cases required for test coverage? Yes, absolutely. Very well put. So yeah, this is how you write your test cases, and this is where I'm going to leave it to you. I would really encourage you all to give this a try, at least write 3 to 5 test cases. Again, if you can write more, if you feel like you're ready to go into test cases, try to write at least 3 to 5. But if you feel like you need to spend more time on test scenarios, figure that out before you can move on to the next assignment. Take your time though. But today's assignment is to write at least 3 to 5 test cases. Again, team, try it. It is simpler than it sounds, and do not write it for again, I will not restrict you. If you try, you can, if you want, you could write it again for login, but there's no point because most login test cases are what you're seeing on my screen. And also try not to write for search also, because search, it's simply going to waste your time filling all those fields. There's actually a simpler method to do that. So we are going to discuss that in class, so don't waste your time on search also. Try to find other kind of test scenarios and write it. You can use anything apart from Karguruji, but you'll have to let me know what site you're using, so that when I go back and look at your assignment, I should be able to know where you're picking it from. Okay, so as long as you're doing that, you can use anything. Anything else, team? So I know you might have, you should have, I mean, I guess you'll have a lot of questions on this, but my suggestion is to, get your hands into this a little bit, and tomorrow when we discuss this more, we can address all your questions. Okay, but do you have enough information to get started on this, team? Do you think so? Okay. All right. So let's, without forgetting, let's do the ROI and cost of quality. So then we're going to have that much test cases that we mentioned in the test scenarios. In fact, we might have more. Like if you're talking about this number, 5, 10, if you're talking about are we going to result in that many test cases? More or less, yes. Roughly, yes. Now I'll define the ROI and cost of quality, and then we can probably move on to, if there are any questions, we can, yeah. Thank you, Emilio. If there's any other questions, we can definitely take it at the end. Now, cost of quality, let's talk about that a little bit. Cost of quality is the specific amount of money expenditure that it costs the client or the software service provider in order to appraise and remove defects. So here we are talking about the amount of money it takes to identify or find bugs, which is the testing activity itself, and the other activity of removing, which is fixing the defects. This is something that is done by the development. Now we know that in addition to just identifying defects, we also prevent them. So cost of quality is the prevention and the identification cost for defects. Now how is this important to us? The only reason why this is important to us is that it should be our conscious thought always to remember not to increase the cost of production for any software, because this is true of any product, team. See, even if you're getting a great product, so if you're trying to build a chair, what would you think about it? So one is you're really passionate about carpentry, you want to try your hands out, so you really get into building a chair. But if you look at the economical situation, normally you would tally your numbers, isn't it? How much money would it take for me to build a chair? Do I have to like go to the lumber store how many times? All of that, material, tools. So we'll take all that into consideration. So we'll compare that to actually buying a product that's already built. So we are always worried about cost of production, and no matter how much quality of a product that you're producing, it is always important to keep the cost of production in check. So how can we keep the cost of production in check? It is by understanding that cost of production is equal to cost of building the software plus cost of quality. So cost of quality will include three things: prevention cost, detection cost, identification cost. Now, when you look at the cost of quality itself, it is important to remember that when we prevent it better, we can actually reduce these two costs. So when you're preventing the problems, the detection and the identification are going down. So when these two things are going down, you're actually keeping the cost of quality down, which is directly proportional to the cost of production, which means the cost of production goes down. So always, as Sandhya really pointed out, what does it mean by whenever possible, correct? So when you can, find your defects when you're reviewing. Make sure that you have an absolute grip on the subject. Make sure that you have an absolute grip on how things work and what requirements are supposed to be satisfied, so that we get on to preventing defects before they happen, so the detection and identification costs are significantly reduced. So again, there's not a lot of practical implementation to this, but it should always be in the tester's mind to keep the cost of quality low in order to keep the overall production cost of the software low. Now, cost of quality numbers, the exact numbers, calculations are not things that regular team members like you and I will have access to. These are things that the high-level management will keep a note of numbers and all that. And for QA teams, it is especially important to show a competitive cost of quality, because we don't create defects. We don't create anything. So when you look at it, when the developer works for 10 days, they have a software product to show at the end of the day. But with testers, even when you work for 10 days, 20 days, even a year, we don't build anything, we don't create anything. So for us, it is very hard to show that the cost of quality that the company is spending on us is actually worthwhile. Which brings us to the next topic, which is ROI. ROI stands for return on investment. I know we are running over time, team. Please give me a minute more. Return on investment, this is not just an IT term, this is applicable to any business area, because when you invest some money, you want to have returns, and this is true of software also. Now, ROI will become an exceedingly difficult concept to prove, especially with testers. So the one way we can show that testing team is important, and it is really, it is really making an impact on how much the overall software product is better if without the quality team. So if you can bring that difference, it is always a great thing. But then I'll also say that the situation for testing teams is not bad as it used to be. So when I started out, my company was like 90,000 people big. It was a huge corporate organization, and you'll be surprised at the number of testers we had. It was just 86. So from the 86, it has grown to a few tens of thousands now. So there's a lot of buy-in in the industry on the importance of the QA team, but we still have a long way to go. We still have a skepticism that, comes into, do I really need to invest that much on the QA team? That's the question in most of the management's minds. Of course, as I said, we have come a long way, and we will go a long way also. But for testers, we'll always have to keep in mind on how we can maximize the return on investment that is placed on the QA team. So that is why one way we can contribute as individual testers is be proactive. So if somebody needs a document to be reviewed, be there to do that. If somebody has, if there's a UAT and one of the users does not know how to test the application or how to use it, step forward and be ready to contribute. Again, if you looking at the exact numbers, exact calculations, probably we don't have insights into that kind of statistics, but we can do our little bit by making sure that we are doing the absolute best that we can for the product. So this is like food for the thought, and some guidelines through which we have to conduct our business. So that's all there is to it. If you have questions, I'll be happy to take them. What's the difference between detection and identification? No difference, same thing. Just a different choice of words is all. So did I say cost of quality is prevention, detection, and the last thing is fixing? So addressing those defects. So cost of quality is these three elements. So if I said detection and identification, I'm sorry, it was just misplaced word, that is all. All right, team. Any questions, anything that you want to share with the class? We did run a lot longer than we planned, but yeah. So tomorrow we will take a look at test plan, test strategy. We'll discuss I'll give you a walkthrough of a test plan document. We'll talk about what is involved and what is a QA team's role and all that. And I'll get back to Emilio's email. And if any one of you have sent me the assignment after 5 p.m. this evening, and I haven't gotten back to you yet, I'll do that in the next few hours. But that's pretty much it, team. So if there's nothing else, we can sign off for the day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.